We are back with another one, and we are in the South China Sea as tensions escalate. What I've learned that there's been many incidents similar to this in the past coming from China towards the Philippines. I read a story from 2019 where a Chinese vessel collided with a Filipino fishing boat, and the captain said he did not want to stop for the survivors because he felt like the other Filipino fishing boats would overrun his vessel. And it sounds like some bullshit to me. And what is going on is the Chinese are provoking the Filipinos. What it really is the Filipinos just trying to live, and they survive from the fishing industry in that area. And the Chinese are trying to claim this area for themselves. Things are escalating. The U.S. don't want to send ships there because it says it has no rights to the territorial waters in that area, which it doesn't. But the Chinese do not have sole rights to that area either. There are many countries in that area that depends on fishing for their economical resources. But let's get into the story. It's going to be a rather long story because I put two articles into one. The second article is telling how U.S. bombers are in Guam. So things are escalating in China and the Philippines region. Let's get into it. Only pirates do this. Philippines accuses China of using bladed weapons in major South China Sea escalation. That definitely seems like a pirate. I've seen pictures with swords and axes. The Chinese are really thugged out on this one. Out of Hong Kong, CNN, the Philippines have accused China's Coast Guard of launching a brutal assault with bladed weapons during a South China Sea clash earlier this week, a major escalation in the festering dispute that threatens to drag the United States into another global conflict. Footage released by the Philippine military on Thursday showed Chinese Coast Guard officers brandishing an axe and other bladed or pointed tools at the Filipino soldiers and slashing their rubber boat in what Manila called a brazen act of aggression. The Philippines and China have blamed each other for the confrontation near the Second Thomas Shoal in the contested Spratly Islands on Monday, which took place during a Philippine mission to resupply its soldiers stationed at a beached World War II-era warship that asserts Manila's territorial claims over the atoll. The incident is the latest in a series of increasingly fraught confrontations in the resource-rich and strategically important waterway. But the scenes captured in the latest footage mark an inflection point in the long simmering tensions, with China adapting a new, for more openly aggressive tactics that analysts say appear calculated to test how the Philippines and its key defense ally, the United States, will respond. That's exactly what it's doing. It's provoking the Philippines to see how the U.S. will react, and I hope that the U.S. can find some kind of peaceful arrangement to avoid war. China claims indisputable sovereignty over almost all of the South China Sea and most of the islands and sandbars within it, including many features that are hundreds of miles from mainland China. Multiple governments, including Manila, hold competing claims. Now that's something they can't do. You're not alone in that area, and people depend on the ocean for economic resources. Colin Cole, research fellow at the South Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore, said it was unprecedented for China's maritime law enforcement to board a Philippine naval vessel. They can be rubber boats, but it doesn't change the fact that they are Philippine Navy vessels. And according to the international law, they enjoy what we term as sovereign immunity, Cole said. That is very dangerous because, if anything, that could even be construed as an act of war. I would agree. Bong Bong said, which is the Filipino president, he said that the loss of a Filipino life could be considered an act of war. I would say it definitely would be an act of war. Even if you lose one, that's an act of war, in my opinion. At a news conference on Wednesday, senior Philippine military officials said China's Coast Guard officers illegally boarded the Philippine rubber boats, looted 7 disassembled rifles stored in a gun cases, destroyed onboard monitor, communication, and navigation equipment, and took the personal cell phones of Filipino personnel. They deliberately punctured our rubber boats using knives and other pointed tools, said Alfonso Torres Jr., commander of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, Western Command. A Philippine Navy serviceman on a rubber boat lost his right thumb when the Chinese Coast Guard rammed it, Torres said. China's Coast Guard also deployed tear gas, blinding strobe lights, and continuously blared sirens, the AFP said. Only pirates do this. Only pirates board and steal and destroy ships' equipment and belongings. General Romeo Bronner Jr., Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, said in a statement, the Chinese Coast Guard personnel had bladed weapons and our personnel fought with bare hands. This is what's important. We were outnumbered and their weapons were unexpected, but our personnel fought with everything they had, Bronner said. At a regular briefing with reporters on Thursday, China's foreign minister was asked to comment on the allegations from the Philippines that their vessels were damaged by Chinese Coast Guard personnel wielding blades and firing tear gas. Spokesman Lin Jian did not address these allegations and instead reasserted Beijing's claims over the second Thomas Shoal, known as the Renai Jia in China. I'm butchering that, but we're going to keep moving. The Philippine operation was not for humanitarian supplies at all. The Philippine vessels carried not only construction materials, but also smuggled weapons. They also intentionally rammed into Chinese vessels and splashed water and threw things on Chinese law enforcement personnel, Lin said. These actions have obviously aggravated tensions at sea and seriously threatened the safety of Chinese personnel and ships. Now I'm going to stop right here. And this article just said earlier that most of the vessels in that area from the Philippines were rubber boats. And I don't see how a rubber boat slamming into one of the Chinese vessels can do any harm. It seems like the rubber boat would take more damage than one of the Chinese vessels. And splashing water, these Chinese vessels have water cannons, so sound like a bunch of bullshit to me. Propaganda is what it is. This handout photograph from the Philippine military shows destroyed windshields on a Philippine Navy boat. Mutual Defense Treaty, what happens in South China Sea has profound implications for the U.S., which has had a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines that dates back decades. The latest clash marks the first run-in between the two countries since a new law in China took effect Saturday to authorize its Coast Guard to seize foreign ships and detain crews suspected of trespassing for up to 60 days without trial. I covered that in the last video. It also comes just weeks after Philippine President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. warned that the death of any Filipino citizen at the hands of another country in the waterway would be very close to an act of war. Marcos has sought closer ties with the U.S., which has repeatedly stressed Washington's ironclad commitment to a 1951 mutual defense treaty between the U.S. and the Philippines that stipulates Both sides would help defend each other if either were attacked by a third party. U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said Monday the United States stands with its ally, the Philippines, and condemns the escalatory and irresponsible actions by China. In a phone call with his Philippine counterpart, Enrique Manalo, on Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said China's actions undermine regional peace and stability and underscored the United States' ironclad commitments to the Philippines under our Mutual Defense Treaty. Derek Grossman, a senior defense analyst at the RAND Corporation, a U.S.-based think tank, said the footage released by the Philippines clearly shows a Chinese attack on Philippine military assets, which, according to Washington and Manila's defense pact, would trigger mutual defense commitments. However, in practical terms, the Philippines itself would have to initiate a move to activate it before the U.S. would intervene militarily, he said. In 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague ruled in favor of the Philippines' claims in a landmark maritime dispute, which concluded that China has no legal basis to assert historic rights to the bulk of South China Sea. But Beijing has ignored the ruling. Instead, it has increasingly pushed its maritime territorial claims, with China Coast Guard ships reinforced by militia boats involved in multiple clashes over the past year that have damaged Philippine ships and seen Filipino sailors injured by water cannon. Philippine restraint. The decision by China's Coast Guard to use bladed weapons in the latest South China Sea clash has drawn comparisons with clashes between China and India on the disputed Himalayan border, where soldiers on both sides have fought fiercely with sticks, rocks, in their hands. The Philippine personnel on the rubber boats are elite forces hailing from the Navy's Special Operations Group, Call said. They are trained in combat. They did not retaliate against the Chinese because they're just simply exercising restraint, he said. They probably have received instructions right from the top that under whatever circumstances they are not supposed to fight back against the Chinese and escalate the situation. It's a good thing to do, but if people keep getting more and more aggressive, you're going to have to fight back eventually. Can't let nobody push you around and punk you. The footage released by the Philippine military also showed another striking development, that the clash took place right next to BRP Sierra Madre, a rusting U.S.-built Philippine Navy landing craft that was run aground deliberately in 1999 with a national flag hoisted on board to assert Manila's territorial claims over Second Thomas Shoal. This is the closest China's Coast Guard has come to the BRP Sierra Madre, Carr noted. Under normal rules of engagement, the garrison would have fired warning shots, he said. The fact that this incident didn't escalate further is because the Philippines exercised utmost restraint. That's a simple fact. China, Carr said, was trying to test both Manila and Washington to find out what exactly where the red line is. They wanted to see how far the U.S. willing to pledge its security commitment to the Filipinos. And of course, I don't think Beijing is dumb enough not to have considered the possibility of having all these actions escalate the situation. I believe that was a risk that they, in the end, decided to take. After crossing the international date line, rearmed 71 and 72 were joined on June 13th by U.S. Air Force F-22A Raptor and U.S. Marine Corps F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters, which flew in formation with the bombers for a photo exercise for photex from a U.S. Marine Corps KC-130. U.S. Air Force and Marine Corps fifth-generation aircraft fly over the North Pacific Ocean. Okay, this second article I put in here is about the deployment of stealth bombers and stealth fighters to Guam. So the U.S. is taking actions, and I believe this is what China were looking for, to see if the U.S. would react, and they have. I doubt we'll see any more incidents in the near future. For now, China has got the U.S. attention. I don't really think they want those problems. But I will say this: a war should ensue from these incidents, that China has the advantage. This is their region, and I do believe it would be rather easy to shut the Philippines off from having resources come in. And that's one advantage China has in this area. And that's why I think a conflict between U.S. and China would not bode well for the U.S. All right, we're going to keep an eye on the story. And if we get any more situations, I would definitely post it. You know, I keep my eye on world events and things happening, and I don't believe that a war will ensue from this. I believe it's China just gauging the situation. I actually thought that it would be an issue between Taiwan and China before it would be with the Philippines. This could be a small step to things escalating. If they control those seas around the Philippines, it will be strategically in their advantage when they, or if they ever decide to go into Taiwan. Yeah, we're going to keep an eye on it. Any more details come up, we will definitely upload it. As always, I welcome everyone's opinions. Just as long as you're not coming in being nasty, we won't have a problem. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.